Hello, everyone. My name is Arnold Vis, and I'm the director of Teach English in China. In 2015-16, we had an amazing group of teachers go on our program, and one of them was James Prescott-Kerr. I've stayed in touch with James for since his time in China, really. And in the course of that, he has written a book about his year in Changzhou in China. It's called Teacher Black. It touches on all sorts of very interesting topics. I finished it last week. It was an amazing read. James talks us through his whole journey teaching in China, the experiences he had. And in a number of videos on this channel, we'll be exploring them in more detail. The focus of his book is that of a Black British teacher in China and his experiences with that. So we'll come back to some other elements of the book in the coming weeks. In terms of this video, we'll be talking about a joint interest that James and I have, which is the football. Because besides, that's right. So besides being an English teacher, James also taught PE and was, involved in football coaching a lot with his school in Changzhou. So we'll be chatting about a few football-related topics in this segment. So first of all, James, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So I know that before going to China, you were also already involved in some football work abroad. So maybe if we start there.
Yes, good topic. Yeah, in 2013, almost straight after my graduation, literally, I graduated and was in another country within 24 hours. I went to South Africa actually with Arsenal on their community program, and we traveled out there and worked with other non-profits in the area, and we were just doing football initiatives out there, so coaching in townships and villages and with the local people. It was a great experience.
So it's fair to say Arsenal made you as a coach then?
You know what? I have to give it to Arsenal. They did. As much as, the Chelsea fan inside me hates to admit it, I'll always have love for Arsenal because of that experience. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, so obviously reading the book, it was really, the first chapters are all about your preparations for China. And as we've discussed, what really stood out to me was how much of a sense of mission there was to it. And it was really great to read. So what made you want to go to China?
It was a myriad of factors, actually. For starters, I think just the whole South Africa experience really opened my eyes up to what the world had to offer. And I just knew I needed to live in another country and not just go there as a tourist. I wanted to live there amongst the people, the same way I did in South Africa, really embrace the culture and talk to the people and live the life out there for more than 3 weeks. So that kind of inspired me to try and up my skill set so I could actually find a job somewhere. So that made me get the level 2 football coaching certificate to build on what I had already, so I could qualify to coach abroad. But then I stumbled across the Teach English in China program, and got introduced to you, and we spoke about it, and I thought this was a great opportunity, and luckily I landed the role.
Yeah, absolutely. And then when it came to the option of football coaching, how did that come about with your English teaching job?
That was really organic, because I remember I think you were shopping my CV out to quite a few schools to help me get a placement, and I initially got a placement in Suzhou as an English teacher, but then another school in Changzhou liked my CV because I had the footballing background and the coaching experience, and they wanted me there as an English and PE teacher. So yeah, I ended up taking that job. And then, I didn't know I was going to have any football coaching to do until I got there. I literally, on the day I arrived, I got introduced to the head football coach and the head PE teacher at the school, and said, yeah, you're going to be his assistant manager. And I was like, fantastic. More than I signed up for, but I'd love it. Yeah. And even before then, in the training camp, actually in Beijing, where we were teaching in the summer camp, I went up to one of the supervisors because I heard other English teachers on the course were taking their class outside for lessons. So I was like, that sounds fun. Let me ask. So I literally just asked the supervisor there, can we take our class outside? And she was just like, you're James. And I was like, yeah, like you're the one with the football resume. I was like, yeah. And she was like a light bulb just went off in her head, and she just got a whole team to arrange this extracurricular football camp, which I was now the head coach of, and there was printing out permission slips, getting them signed all within like 20 minutes. And I was like, I just wanted to take my class outside. And now I'm like head of the summer camp. I was like, okay. And another coach as well, Adam, he had a coaching certificate as well. So he was like my co-coach. So we just took all the kids that signed up out, and we had our own little football club.
That sounds amazing. So that was your first experience with kind of how Chinese students react to football. So what was that first session like?
The first session, everyone was really enthusiastic. They were so excited. They just wanted to get involved. I think they just assumed I was really good at it, which, to be honest, I feel like I'd like to think I delivered. They were just so excited to just, because I don't think they'd had actual like football sessions to that level before, where actually someone that they're like a specialist in football actually, you know, helps them with certain skill sets and really well drilled lessons that are more technical, as opposed to like a lot of the education in China is quite rigid, whereas with football it's a lot more free flowing, and you just try and get people involved and having fun. So they loved it from the get-go.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something that really stood out in your book, the section where you talked about this issue about maybe the creativity not being as sort of a big part of Chinese football culture. So in terms of the skills, if you look at that, like the skills that, like, what were the parts of the skills that they excelled in, and what were the things they were maybe less good at?
To be honest, the level, it wasn't great, but maybe I'm talking from another standpoint, because like I said, I've done coaching with Arsenal, and I've coached kids that are very good at football. So I had certain expectations. They weren't that great. I'd say what they excelled in, I say they were good listeners. Like they took advice really well. If you pull someone aside and say, you don't pass like that, you pass like this, they would have it down pat pretty quickly. Like they're really good at picking things up, and they're really committed to just improving. One thing here, even though the skill level is quite high generally in the UK, a lot of the children, they're just trying to have fun really, but they just happen to be good at it because they play all the time on the weekend with their parents or family or whatever. But here they really wanted to get better. There was even one child at the end of the session, I try to end with, most coaches, you end with a game, let them all play. Literally, one kid just said to me like, "Coach, I don't want to play. I just want to keep practicing my passing." And I was like, "No, play." And he was like, "No, I want to pass." I was like, "You know what? I can't force you to play. Like, if you want to practice your passing, here's a ball. Go and do what you want to do." So I'd never come across anything like that in my life.
It's so interesting you say that, because it reminds me of some of my students in China who basically didn't want class to end and didn't want to take breaks and wanted more time sort of to work. So when you then sort of got to Changzhou, I think you're working with a younger age group, right, in Changzhou?
I was working with kids from age like 4 to 10, but in the football club it was more like 7 to 10. It was more of the older kids in the actual football club.
So something that I remember well from the chapter on Changzhou was the colleague you had, the Chinese coach. I think he was self-styled Mourinho, right? Tell us a bit about him.
Yeah, his name's John, or his English name, he told me, was John, but on his WeChat his name was Chinese Mourinho. So it kind of showed that kind of said everything you need to know about him. He was quite rigid in his management style. He was very serious. He was a good coach. He always had a plan in mind. He just knew what he needed to do. But I'd say the one thing I did say to him as well, so I don't really feel bad about saying it now, is that I felt like he kind of neglected the kids that weren't as good. Or sometimes if he couldn't go, he kind of just ship them off to me, like, you take them over there and I'll keep the good kids. I was like, okay. But I did say, it's not an academy. You're at a primary school, so you got to look after everyone, make sure everyone's developing, because that is the main thing. And to be honest, it's not a problem unique to China either. That especially at a young level, if you're not professional, it's not about winning or making yourself look good. You're not the main character here. It's all about the kids getting better. Doesn't matter if you finish bottom of your league, but every child you're managing or coaching is considerably better than when you've got them. You've done a great job at that level. So that, I think, like, a lot of coaches worldwide lose sense of that.
Exactly. So I think with China, I mean, you had early morning lessons, and one thing that I was very curious about was how important you felt the kids sort of considered football compared to other subjects? Because I know that in China, obviously, academics, academic achievement is valued very, very highly. So where did football and PE come in?
Not very high, to be honest. And actually, one thing I learned while I was out in China, that my school having actually PE lessons and committed PE teacher was actually quite revolutionary for China in general. And a lot of classes didn't, a lot of schools didn't have PE as even a normal lesson. But yeah, in where it stood, it wasn't that high in their priorities, to be honest. But it's just more with China, if everything they do, they want to do it well. So they did obviously put the effort and resources in, but in terms of their priorities in terms of academia and even the other sports, it wasn't that high.
Yeah, exactly. So in terms of the year then, like how did things progress over the course of the year in terms of your interactions with the students and also with your colleague, the Chinese coach?
In terms of that, I feel like it was just quite steady progression, really. Just as with any kids, like I said, they were really receptive when you gave them advice. But I would say with the coach, he became quite territorial with the team a bit, kind of very rigid. Like I remember there was one time I learned pretty early. I think it was my first session I did with him. He had his plan. He was doing a session, and he left me in charge of like half of the kids. And usually here, like when I coach here or most places, they would say if you make adjustments to the session, as long as you're sticking to the theme, the other head coach will expect it, let alone support it. But whereas I kind of saw the kids were progressing with the session quite well and kind of got to grasp of it, so I progressed it to make it a little bit harder. And he kind of ran over, was like, no, my plan. I was like, okay. So it's kind of like I kind of had to play a bit more second fiddle than I'm normally used to.
Yeah, I remember that from reading the book. And what was his? I mean, if you compare obviously with your background with coaching in the UK and your time with Arsenal, like what in observing him as a coach, like what stood out about his Chinese management philosophy?
He was just very strict. Like there was probably given more punishment laps to kids than I've ever seen, and he just not very wasn't as smiley or animated, or like you didn't really, a lot of the time he didn't really seem like he was having fun. He was really there to do a job and get these kids drilled. Whereas where you're coaching with kids, especially at that age, that are what I'm more used to is more, you're trying to obviously improve the kids, but you've got to have more of an element of fun to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you talked about their age, like what? So from the age children you were working with in China, if they're really into football, they're good at football. Like, what would the next steps look like? Would it be the same as for us over here, or what would be the progression for kids who want to progress with football?
That's a very good question, actually. To be honest, it wasn't as when I was out there, it wasn't as clear as it would have been now. But I feel like now that since I've left, they've taken the whole professional football thing more seriously. So there is more, I think, talent identification. There are also a lot more football summer camps going on and other places outside of school where kids can play football and try and excel at it. So I think through that, I think it's more just kind of similar to here. If you know someone that knows someone that works at the club, you could potentially get a trial and get into the academy. But yeah, and they do have a number of specialized schools where it's like a school that, football school pretty much, where you have the academic side and just football.
Yeah, so this ties in well with a very interesting chapter in your book. Specifically, I think it's titled Football in China, and it goes through methodically, it goes through your outlook on China's football future, because obviously Xi Jinping has made this a big part of his sort of aims for China. I think is the goal to win the World Cup by 2050.
Yeah.
And you are going over in that chapter in some of the detail about your what you think of his plan and the prospects for it. So can you summarize that?
Yeah, of course. long story short, I don't think that's a realistic goal for him to win it by 2050 because they're so far behind in terms of where they need to be at the highest level. I think there are some things that will help them get to where they need to be, such as the influx of foreign coaches and even foreign players. There's a lot of money being pumped into Chinese football right now. So they're going to have a few stars that can come into the league and raise the profile of football in China to get more people interested. Even, I think while I was there, Jiangsu Suning, which was my local team in China, actually. I was in the same province. They signed Ramirez, who's an ex-Chelsea player. I'm a Chelsea fan too. So it all kind of fit. It came together perfectly. Yeah, from as soon as he signed, I just started seeing more billboards and adverts at bus stops with him and other Jiangsu Suning players just around. So they're really trying to raise the profile of it and get more people interested. And obviously that's going to accumulate more people that want to play it and just get involved. And also with having elite players in China, that's going to rub off on, you know, the Chinese players that are already there. There's a lot for them to learn from playing alongside them and being a presence. Yeah. And but so that will help. And obviously there's been a huge investment in infrastructure as well as players, and they made a smart move as well in capping the amount of foreign players that can play in the Chinese league. So it's not just going to be an all-star foreign lineup. Chinese players will have a chance to go through the assembly line and end up in the first team, so they'll get a chance to develop as well. But as well, what will hold them back? That's the thing. They're doing a lot of things right, but there's just too many factors that will hold them back as well. Like most football stories are romanticized, about the likes of Pele and Maradona used to play in beaches or even favelas in like open spaces. Well, that's the main. Whether it was like playing football in the park with your friends or in the favelas or in the caged football, like it was always an open space somewhere. If open space was somewhere like committed to football where it was easy to access. That's what brings football. That's why football touches the hearts of millions, because anyone can really play. Whereas like in China, anyone can't play really, because there's not really any parks that are just grass that don't have a commitment to anything, just an open space where you can do anything. There's not many of them. I think during my whole time in China, I think I saw 2 parks. And all the other playgrounds, it's usually basketball courts. Obviously, China are great at basketball, probably top 2 or 3 in the world. And it shows because, a lot of their resources are dedicated to it. And the way people can access a football pitch or like find a place to put 2 jumpers for goalposts in the park, there's basketball courts everywhere in China. I think that's something they really need to work on. And as well, what you touched on about the creativity element. I think it's just the whole style of education. It's a bit rigid. So when kids out there are just left to their own devices, they don't really know what to do. Even if not even just football, just in anything. I remember one session we did in the summer camp. We just asked them to create their own superhero, and a lot of them they either drew the Baymax from Big Hero 6, who's obviously not an original idea, or like sports stars or book characters they already knew. So in terms of just conjuring their own ideas, it's not their strong point. They're great at absorbing information and regurgitating it and all the really academic subjects, but in terms of creativity, it kind of lacks from the academic standpoint.
Yeah, exactly. Because I remember in the book you talked about some of this and sort of practicing stepovers in football and things like that.
Yeah.
So how did that go then when you were introducing those elements?
Yeah, funny thing that I didn't introduce that. It was the head coach, because to be honest, I wouldn't have done it, because even the kid that was showing me his stepovers, there were so many basic elements to his game that he needed to work on. Like stepovers were the least of his troubles. But he wanted to show me his new skills, and he was showing me the stepovers. And when he was doing them, he was meant to do them around me, but he did the skill and he got his distances a bit mixed up, and he got a bit too close to me. But normally, if you get too close to someone while you're doing your stepovers, you will just do 1 or 2 less stepovers and just round the player. Whereas this kid just kept doing stepovers until he just stamped all over my toes. It was quite a painful experience, but I was also thinking, normally, your instincts will kick in here and think, I need to stop and, just go around. So it's just small things like that where you shouldn't have to be coached that when you're running into the player, stop doing your step over and go past them. Just small things like that that needs to be, you can't coach it. It's something that needs to be innate, and that for that to happen, kids need more time and freedom to express themselves without supervision or coaching. And I don't think kids in China get that enough.
Yeah, it's such an interesting one, because also this applies to China, but even in other parts of the world, obviously the playing outdoors happens less than in the past, but certainly, like you said, it's still more than in China. So maybe two other topics before we go and end this segment. So one has to do with something I did quite a lot in China as well, is essentially watching football in the pub, because that's something like before going to China, I didn't necessarily expect that was going to be something I would be doing. But it's something you also did enjoy. Euro 2016 it was at the time. So what was that like the watching experience in China in terms of that side of it?
Oh, that was brilliant. It was mainly like British expats that were watching, to be honest, but the people that were there, they were really clued up on their football. The ones that were there that actually went out of their way. I knew the main guy, the guy that owned the restaurant, he was an AC Milan fan. I think Balotelli was playing for them at the time or something. He was a really big Balotelli fan, and I love Balotelli as well. So we're talking a lot about that. So even just things like that, in China, talking about Balotelli, like who would have thought it? But yeah, the people that I give it to, the people that do have an invested interest in world football and domestic football, they knew their stuff, and they're passionate. They're really passionate, and it's a great experience. The atmosphere was electric, as you'd expect, and yeah, it was I felt pretty most at home watching football in pubs in China.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think this is it. Like you said, I think just to learn from what I remember as well, like just because there's obviously quite a time difference. So sometimes just a dedication, the type of person who's watching it at that time is definitely dedicated. And then, so you had also an experience watching football in the stadium in China. Your team then with Ramirez.
Yes.
And so what was that like? And what was the level like of that game you watched in the Super League?
I think that was one of the most buzzing atmospheres I've seen in a game as well. The stadium was huge, but I say that it wasn't that full. But the people that were there, they were going ballistic. Like there was even like a cheerleader at the front. He wasn't even watching the game. He was just looking at all the crowd, just like, come on, like leading the songs and chants and jumping around. Like the energy was crazy. It was funny as well. Like when we were joining in with the chants, like they were like cheering us as well, because they were getting involved. I was singing Ramirez's name with them, and they were loving it as well.
And he capped it off with a nice goal, I think, right? That time
he did. He scored, which is literally what I came there for. Ex-Chelsea boy, we've been playing for my Chinese local team, and he actually scored as well. And but the standard was pretty good. They knocked the ball around pretty well. One thing I will say, it's funny because the defense isn't that great and the finishing isn't that great, so it made for quite the spectacle because there's a lot of chances at both ends. And one thing is, I'd say the away team, like, because China's so huge and it's a national league, like if you're traveling for an away game, you have to go really far. But I think the away team, they only had a couple hundred, but they were so loud and so passionate. Like you could hear them from across the stadium. And when they scored, they were going crazy, scarves flying in the air. Like the passion for the minority that are into football there, they love the sport as much as the British.
Amazing. Well, it's really interesting to hear about this, and I'll definitely keep an even closer look than at the closer eye on the Chinese Super League. Okay, well, in terms of this football segment, that's it. So definitely check out James's book. We'll put a link in the description. It's Teacher Black, about his whole year in China, and football is part of that. So check out the book, and we'll be back with more videos with James in the near future.
Thank you.
Okay, cheers, James.